Friday edition. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about some things that are happening with Cuba. It's going to be probably a longer episode because things have been coming out pretty, quickly. But yeah, man, there's a lot of things going on right now. One of them, there was the president of Cuba. He made this speech yesterday at a rally, pro Cuba, and I can give you the exact quote. Probably will post it on the comments here. But he's basically saying that uh, his followers will have to lay down their lives for the revolution to be successful. And he mentioned women and children. It's desperate times right now for Cuba. It sounded very much like a rant from Jim Jones right before the Kool-Aid incident, where everyone drank the Kool-Aid. Very desperate, very pleading for attention. And he's wanting for Cubans to fight. Now, what I posted in my CARB video was that there are very distinct orders that if Cuba is taken over by the US government, that they have orders that there's militias that will do years and years of guerrilla warfare to fight off any aggression, what they call aggression, from someone invading their country. But you and I both know the United States government can just enter Cuba and take over the entire island through Guantanamo Bay within a matter of hours. Will there be resistance? I don't think that Cubans would resist. At this point, how would they resist? There are no weapons for military, militias given to individuals. There were these videos that surfaced a couple weeks ago of individuals being trained in soccer fields, for instance, for militia drills. Just to show they're proving. But then yesterday I saw this video about a cannon being potentially just driven by a donkey, in the middle of the jungle, So it's like, how much are they going to be able to be taken seriously if there's actually an invasion? With that said, I was on this group called Friends of Cuba, and the Daily Wire posted a video today where one of their foreign correspondents were talking about how bots were infiltrating every aspect of the internet. And not only were they commenting, but they had real profiles commenting pro Iranian and pro China comments like, hey, give China a chance. Hey, give Iran a chance. Iran is not doing anything wrong, things like that. And on this group, Friends of Cuba, I posted about how the Cuban government was recruiting Cubans to fight in Russia all the way back since 2023. And it's on the internet. Everyone knows about it on the internet. And within 5 minutes, 125 comments were saying things like, I was a MAGA influencer, that it was propaganda and trash, and I was no friend to Cuba. And then it's how it was fake, and Russia has never recruited Cubans. And I was talking to these people, just really, really pro-communist comments. And you go to these profiles, and a lot of them are locked. It's just profile picture locked. You don't know who's commenting. You don't see their friends. You don't see their timeline. Some you do see their timeline and friends and everything, but they're all made within a year. So I'm starting to think that a lot of these comments are bots, because to be so pro-communism that you're protecting the ideas of it and you're posting it publicly on Facebook and just communism's awesome, communism's great, the U.S. should stay out of affairs, the whole idea of my post was saying, listen, the president of Cuba is saying that Cuba is not a threat to the United States. But everyone knows that China has bases on Cuba. Russia has bases on Cuba. China is putting infrastructure on Cuba that is electric. People I know in Cuba, they're saying they're converting to electric, energies instead of oil. So, when it comes down to it, the United States funded the war to help protect the Ukrainians from Russia, which I support. the whole idea is that Cubans have been fighting in the war with Ukraine by being recruited by Russia, and Russia has been recruiting them through WhatsApp. And there was this Reuters report that talked about it 2 years ago. This mother was talking about how her son was recruited on WhatsApp by the government of Russia, getting paid, and it's just like a common knowledge thing. But you go on this group and everyone's like, "You're lying. You're making this up. It's propaganda." And it's like, no, guys, this is like a known fact. Russia has been doing this for 3 years, and Cubans are fighting and probably dying. We just don't know about it in Russia, fighting Ukraine. So the reason why I was telling you this is when it comes down to it, we are looking at Russians who are America's enemies recruiting Cubans to fight against our ally, which is Ukraine. And Ukraine is, something that we spent over $1 billion on, and should be U.S. interest that they win that war, although Trump has had some different views. So what I wanted to say is that when you are actually actively recruiting Cubans and you're Russia, and then you have the president of Cuba talking about how important it is to keep the revolution alive, and that Cubans should be dying, men and women should be dying for the revolution to keep it alive, they're on their last rope. And they are not the kind of people who are, fierce. I mean, they're fierce, but they're going to be trying to draft women and men into a military service if they're actually, going to war with the United States. And with that said, last night also, the government, our US government, Trump sent a message to the Pentagon to get ready for operations in Cuba and to ramp up potential targets, landing sites, all of these operations in Cuba. So when it comes down to it, Cuba is going to be on high alert after comments like that are sent to the press. Like, okay, so the Pentagon's trying to formulate a takeover of Cuba, and it's actually hitting to the Pentagon, and then news outlets get it, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is something that we should cover, and they cover it, and then everyone is freaking out because they know that when Trump says he's going to take Cuba, he actually is going to do it, just like he said he was going to put an end to Iran. And he always says it a couple weeks before he does it. So Cuba's next, and then you see the Cuban community just celebrating. Like, if you've seen the memes, they are hilarious. They are AI driven, of Marco Rubio and Donald Trump riding down the streets of Havana in a classic 50s car. You have them doing an insurrection, a couple of these AI videos doing an insurrection on the Cuban government and just like taking it over. There's a movie that came out in 2024, which was depicting what a civil war would look like in the United States. And it was called Civil War 2024, right before the election. And there were scenes in that movie where, the opposition took over the United States government. Well, they made the same kind of AI video where the United States government just, seized the president of Cuba, went into office overnight, guns a-blazing, with the backtrack of Cuba's Next, which was made by an artist who was a singer from Cuba. Like Cuba's Next, not just Cuba Libre, but like Cuba's Next. And, I've seen Cuba Libre flags all across Nashville. It's a very common theme to say Cuba Libre, but now they're saying Cuba's Next. So they're taking those words and making it into a celebration. And Cubans in Miami, they're making these memes of Cuban officials going to jail, being in handcuffs, the United States completely liberating the island. You see the videos I reposted on this channel of like just a flurry of AI videos of like what Cuba would look like under a U.S. Rule or a U.S. Liberation with capitalism. And it shows cities and states and towns just coming out of the dark ages, having new lights, new sounds, new roads, all that stuff, and modernizing with McDonald's and Taco Bell and, all those things, that America has to offer on the island, Starbucks. So Cubans are making this in Miami, sending it out like, this is what we want. We want a free Cuba, and we want a Cuba to be proud of, and we want a Cuba that is free from communism. And meanwhile, it seems like the only one who really wants communism are the ones who are, 60 years old in Cuba, who are revolutionaries. Yeah, so here's the thing. We have to look at the broad picture of Cuba has been a threat to the United States for 61 years. And now it's at its twilight moment. And Trump's probably going to take it by the end of the year. I think it could easily be a state or a territory by the end of the year. And then all the Cubans who are on the ground will have access to food and medicine. Because if the president of Cuba actually steps aside, then the United States government will have freedom to release the sanctions and then allow food, clothing, and medicine into the country. Now, the United States has never declined to sell food or medicine to the Cuban government. The Cuban government has refused to buy it out of revenge and retaliation for Americans. They like, okay, you sanction us, we're not going to buy your things. And that's why people are suffering in Cuba. Also, we need to know that every communistic dictatorship country will eventually fall this century. It's an outdated system, and democracy is the way to win. So another thing that the president of Cuba was talking about was that he was elected. And everyone knows there's no one-party system elections. If there's a one-party system, they choose their leaders and then they throw them into the spotlight, and then the people have to accept them. There's no elections. So I was saying we should make a t-shirt saying one-party systems don't hold elections or something like that, because there's no elections with Putin. There's no elections with North Korea. It's like they'll say it's an election and he's the president because that's popular, but it's a dictatorship. They put themselves in power. And one family being in power for 60 years is just really, really something. How is it going to look for the future when Cuba is the next Miami? When you can go to Cuba without a visa free from American Airlines or another U.S. carrier, and you can go there and you can actually have nice things, and you're not going to see people in poverty. When I know Cubans in America, one Cuban who I know spoke to me, and he pointed to a homeless person on the street in the United States, and he said, even the homeless in the United States have a better lifestyle and a better quality of life than Cubans. So anyone who could leave the island has left the island. One of the reasons communism has failed and it's a system of control is because if you're a Cuban, you cannot afford to leave the island. If you make $152 US a year, it's impossible. So they keep people poor so they can't buy tickets to leave. And that's a very common fact. The Cuban government will restrict every aspect of freedom and strip it away from Cubans, and they do it financially. Also, the United States government is calling for what they want out of Cuba is to have free businesses, like freedom of press. Cubans can own businesses with no government overreach or control. And, there's no freedom of press in Cuba. So everything that comes out of Cuba is directly from the Cuban government, the narratives from the Cuban government. We talked about on this channel about a month ago that the Cuban government were sending these pamphlets and digital emails to people, just telling them that, hey, we're going to survive this. Conserve water, pre-prepare food, get candles ready. Like the blackouts are going to be intense. So instead of offering a real solution, they are contributing to their citizens going insane. It's like you only can charge your phone for 3 hours a day. So as you know, there's a lot of intention. What I'm putting on this channel is centered around Cuba. But also, what is it going to look like when this is all said and done? Well, tourism is down by about 44% to Cuba. And that was the only way they got their hard currency, because you can't export if you're a Cuban business, because there are no Cuban businesses. The government owns everything, and what they export is very minimal. So tourism has a big role to do with their decline, I would say. But we're at the point that it's the end of April. What's the future going to look like in the next couple of weeks? And that is to be determined. So yeah, guys, if I ever have like breaking news or anything like that, I will definitely post it, even if I'm in a car. I was driving yesterday, so it was kind of like one of those things you had to, see and just bear with me. But I think it's better to do an episode from the car than nowhere at all. So I hope you guys are having a great Friday. Once again, it's April 17th, in case you watch this later. And have a good one. We'll see you on the next episode of Right Politics. Thank you for watching.